Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome, welcome. Ilyse Morgenstein Fuerst, PhD, is Associate Professor of Religion and Director of the Humanities Center at the University of Vermont. Her research centers on Islam and the Muslims of South Asia, imperialism, and intersections of religion, race, and belonging. She is author of several books, most recently, Religion is Not Done With You, published by Beacon in 2024. Morgenstein Fuerst is the author of numerous articles about Islam, Islamic studies, and religion in South Asia, as well as religious literacy. She is also the co-host and co-producer of the grant-funded podcast, Keeping It 101, A Killjoy's Introduction to Religion. Morgenstein Fuerst has won several Teacher Scholar Awards. Let's please welcome Ilyse.
Hi, everybody. Okay, I have good levels. Amazing. Hi, I'm Ilyse. I'm so honored to be here, and I want to thank Bert for inviting me. Bert's a great neighbor, and it's a joy to be here doing a neighborly thing. Neighborly is actually going to be the theme of today. I like to introduce myself as a killjoy, which usually sounds like I'm being mean to myself or to my mom or something who raised me up this way. But instead, I really want to say that being a killjoy means that I think we need to have the most critical view of the world we live in so that we can assess problems and change it, okay? So my sense of it is that I'm gonna say a lot of things that are really bad about the world we live in, and then I'm gonna say, now that we know, what can we do? So the theme is actually, how do we be better neighbors? Truly, how do we be better neighbors? And in 2026, I don't know how you all feel reading the news. I'm not making assumptions about your various political backgrounds. You don't need to share my politics. I definitely don't need to share yours. But for real, I hope we can all agree that there is a different happening right now. There is a difference in the America that I grew up in, that my parents grew up in, that my grandparents grew up in, and where we're living right now. And I am the kind of social justice activist that actually thinks you start with your neighbors and in your community. If we want a better world, we have to show up better for each other. So today's thesis statement, if you were my first year students, I would say take out your notebooks. This is the point of the whole lecture. You don't have to listen after this. The rest is just detail. This is the point. The point is, if we know our neighbors better, if we understand our system better, then we can all live a little bit more comfortably within it. Not perfectly, not beautifully necessarily, but more comfortably within it. So here's hoping I'm a good neighbor to you. This is my hometown. I live here, and as Bert has been a good neighbor to me. The title of my talk today is Religious Literacy is Social Justice, and I stand by that. I think that we cannot do social justice work unless we know about our own religion, the religions of our neighbors, and how religion functions as a system. But why should you listen to me? Who do I think I am? That's a really great question. I like to start with a positionality statement. That's a really fancy new wave way to say, who the heck are you, Ilyse? Well, I'm a girl that grew up in Brooklyn and New Jersey. I grew up as a Jew. I am still a Jewish person. I talk like this when I talk to my parents. I actually have a very thick accent when I'm not paying attention, but I learned how to speak properly so that people take me seriously as a professor. I tend to swear a lot. I promise I will try not to harm your young ears. But I do have small children at home, and when I lecture for students, it makes me sound cool with the 20-year-olds if I drop an SHIT every so often. So if I feel like that, I apologize off the bat. This is so that I do not swear at home. The other thing about me is that I have a PhD. I went to Colgate University, then I went to Harvard University, then I went to UNC Chapel Hill, and I did a joint PhD at Duke and UNC in religion and Islamic studies. It was a really cool program that did both. I have contracted with the State Department for 15 out of the last 20 years. I work on terrorism in parts of the world that most of you would be, frankly, quite trepidatious to go to. And I love those parts of the world. And I met beautiful, loving, fabulous people in those parts of the world. I mostly teach about race, racialization, and racism. Racialization is how do we know a group came to be identified as a race? So in my work, when I talk about Muslims, how do we know Islam has been racialized? Well, we think of Muslims as one unified blob, despite there being 2 billion of them speaking every language known to man around the world for the last 1,600 years, right? So we have both homogeneous blob and diversity. How do we make sense of that? That's the theory of racialization. That's the work I do. The other reason you should listen to me is because you asked me to come, but you don't have to take any of it on. So if it doesn't agree with you, that's okay. If you want to hold those questions to Q&A, you got it. I am a lady in a male-dominated field. I promise you can't scare me with a question. I want to start with some really basic stuff. Religion is one of those things that bothers everyone. My poor father is like a very nice man who owned a liquor store for many, many years. And now is like, I don't know what we taught you, right? Like we taught you no politics and no religion at the dinner table, and this is literally all you do to people. You are a walking bad manner. And I'm like, yes, indeed. But religion is one of those things that we all think we know because many of us were brought up in religious traditions or we were brought up in non-religious or secular traditions, and both of those come with a bias about what religion is. So here are my quick definitions of religion so that we're all on the same page. These are the frameworks I'm going to be using for today's talk. For me, this is my catchphrase of sorts. If you tune into that podcast, if you picked up Religion Is Not Done With You, you will see this on almost every page. Religion is what people do. I love this one. My students hate it because isn't that everything? Yep, sure is. Religion is a social system. It's meant to be total. Our sense of separating church and state, there's secular things and there's religious things. We don't have historical data that that's true, actually. We have a lot of historical data that secularism is just removing Christianity from spaces. Secularity is not equally accessible to all people. We're going to get there in a minute. Religion is what people do allows us to talk about why we think of things as hypocritical, right? How can a religious text say, love your neighbor, and then the state says capital punishment is okay? How do we live with those contradictions? Religion is what people do, not what people believe. That's a really important one, and it really bothers people. So I'm going to stick with it for a second. It's not just belief because, first of all, not all religions prioritize belief. I'm from one of them. Judaism does not actually demand that you believe anything. It demands that you do a lot. It likes if you believe in things, but it doesn't need you to believe in things. It needs you to do them. So action is valued in Judaism. Same with Islam. Islam values action. After you take Shahada, that's the saying that says that all Muslims, it's like a creed of sorts, though creed is a really Christian word, so I want to use it, but a creed of sorts that says there is no God but God and Muhammad is his messenger. If you say that, great. Do you have to believe it all the way? Ideally, yes, but actually, no. You just have to do good things that are delineated in the Quran and in the Hadith, right? Belief is actually a really Christian way to think about God. It's a really Christian way to think about religion, and it's not something that scholars can access. Like I can't get into your brain and know what you believe. I can listen to what you tell me, but if your actions don't line up with your beliefs, it leaves us in a really weird spot to say, well, you must not be religious. That is okay at a personal level. Professionally, that's not great. Here's why. The Klan is a religious organization. Many of us would not like to claim the Klan as part of our religious brethren. I really hope that that's true. But our job as neighbors, forget scholars, as neighbors, is actually to understand that when people tell you that they are doing religion, even if it doesn't look like your religion, even if that religion is the exact same religion, religion is what people do, not what you think they should do, not what a book said. It's what people are actively doing with it. It's how we make sense of people reading the Bible and getting 5 different answers from it, right? It is perfectly reasonable to read the Bible and think slavery is okay. It's perfectly reasonable to read the Bible and think the exact opposite. So what you believe is actually irrelevant. What are you doing that is relevant? And the last thing that religion is, it is a system of power. This is the one that really bothers everyone, because in America, we're raised to believe that religion is personal, it's private, it's belief, it's not my business, it is definitely not for dinner conversation, right? My dad is imminently disappointed in my dinner conversation. But religion is a system of power that has been used as a racialized system, as a class system, and as a system of oppression. It's also been used as a system of liberation, but it is absolutely part and parcel of Euro-American imperialism, and it has always been tied up with some of the worst features of those systems of power. We don't get a definition of whiteness without Christianity. We don't get a definition of blackness without an assumption of biblical truths. Those systems are inextricable, and we do violence to our friends and our neighbors when we pretend like we can tap dance around those as if they're super separate things. So for me, religion is what people do. We are watching actions. We are not just talking about belief because it forecloses quite a lot of world religions from even counting as religions, which, like, as a historian of violence, that's a way that we did a lot of genocides. You're not a person if you don't have a recognizable religion was literally quoting leaders of the American government as they did Native American removal and genocide. So not having a recognizable religion has absolutely factually led to genocide. So this question of not just making it belief, for me, is actually about social justice. How do we recognize the horrors and do better next time? And it's also this system of power. Okay, what isn't religion? Oh dear. It's just on a delay? Okay. I'm gonna panic about tech every time as if I am not like a millennial who's quite good at tech. But okay, fabulous, thanks. So what isn't religion? If those things are religion, I would say religion is not absent from either public or private life, even if you think that you are not religious. Religion is kind of all over the place. Religion is also not culpable for everything that's bad in the world. I think in Vermont is famously one of the least religious states. I actually just want to grant about proving that wrong. But one of the things that I hear a lot from our neighbors here in the state is that, like, actually religion is a bad thing. It does all of the bad thing. It is responsible for all of the hatred in the world. And that's just not true at all. Religion, certainly religious actors have done horrible things, and also religious actors have done fabulous things. I like to tell students that two things are true about social justice movements in the United States. The first is, and for college students this is really important for them because they feel very grim about the state of the world right now, is that no social justice movement in this country has been successful without youth. The other thing that is true is zero social justice movements have been successful without religion in this country. Period. So thinking about it as just bad is just wrong. The last thing it is it's not done with you, even if you're done with it. So for those of us who choose more secular lives, who have become atheists, who have never been to church or synagogue or mosque or temple or gurdwara, whatever, that doesn't mean that it's done with you. Your private life is not the only life you live. You hang out in the public square. You pay your taxes. You go to your kid's school. Religion is in all of those places, whether you want it to be or not. And so pretending like it's a private issue doesn't actually help us make sense of it. I like to ask my students, like, so what? Why do we care? Frankly, I care because religion is inherently political. Doing it, not doing it, how it's weaponized, how it's used, all of it is political. It shows up. You vote on a Tuesday and not on a weekend because of church. This is a great historical story. In the 1800s, when they decided that all Americans, all land-owning white male Americans needed to have a time to vote, they needed to pick a day. And everyone was like, well, it can't be Sunday, that's church. It can't be Saturday, that's market. We ride horses. So some of us live in, like, Rutland. How do we get to the voting poll? All right, you need a day for travel, that's Monday. Voting is Tuesday. That's exactly why. Voting is Tuesday because of church patterns in the 1800s. I'm not mad at that, but as a working mom who likes to vote, it seems strange to me that we have these things called weekends and we do not use them for public or civic duties. Instead, we make it a day you have to take off from work if you have that privilege, right? And that's about religion lurking in I like to say it lurks in the floorboard like the telltale heart. You can hear it beating if you listen. We should also care because religion is used liberatorily and oppressively. Some of you don't feel like you need to read this. I do both so that there's multiple ways of learning for me. You can listen or you can read. Both are going to do the same work for you. But for me, we need to think about how we see religion limitedly, where we think of good religious people as always following the rules and bad religious people as doing what we don't like, right? But the reality is that most of us are contradictory weirdos who live in our lives in weird ways. I love my mom. I love to make fun of my mom. My mom and I are good buddies. My mom's name is Flo, and Flo is a good Brooklyn Jew who was a first-generation American and is a post-Holocaust Jewish person. My mom's name is Florence so that she would sound more white because her mother was worried about not sounding right, white and Christian. They have just escaped all of the places. But my mom keeps kosher in the house. We have 2 sets of dishes, right, for milk and meat. We had 2 refrigerators. We were poor. We grew up in public housing. My mom had 2 refrigerators. This is how serious she is about kosher law in the house. Let me tell you that lady's favorite order at a restaurant. It's a bacon double cheeseburger. Because outside of the house, you have to act American. That's a post-Holocaust racialization of Judaism. It is a historical moment. It is also a personal choice. My mom is a free agent who just really likes bacon. But not inside the house. The house has to stay kosher, right? That sounds hypocritical and weird and creative and bizarre and idiosyncratic. It's not, though. Scholars like Samira Mehta have proven that Jews, right after the war, right my mom's age, my mom's a very old boomer. She would be very mad for me outing her age, but I feel like she's among compatriots here. There's a way that my mom is actually really typical. New York, Brooklyn Jews that were born right after World War II really did try to perform whiteness and Americanness in public, and they kept their religion private as a safety strategy, as a trauma response, and as a method to assimilate. It's not hypocritical for my mom to eat a bacon double cheeseburger outside of the house. But if our understanding of Judaism was Jews never eat bacon and they don't mix milk and meat, then your question might be, is my mom a real Jew? To which I would say, "Feh," which is Yiddish for shut up. Or "Bleh," don't say that, right? We wouldn't want that to happen. We don't want my mom to fall out of the data. So we care because it's used in ways that are liberatory and oppressive. We might say it's oppressive that my mom felt the need, or my mom's family felt the need to have her assimilate so thoroughly that her name at home was Yiddish, but her name in public was Flo, right? But at the same time, I want space for my mom. I want my mom to be a full person that we can recognize in her full humanity and as part of a historical context. The other thing that we need to deal with is that this, as Sylvester Johnson teaches us, has never been a Christian state. The laws of the nation have never been tied to the Bible. We are not a theocracy, but we are absolutely a Christian nation, as in the understanding and assumption of our shared values comes from Christianity and explicitly white Protestantism. If that's true, and I'm telling you as a scholar it is, if that's true, then actually we can't ignore religion at all. The way we talk about nearly everything in this country is undergirded by a sense of morality that doesn't apply to all of our citizens. Protestant ethics are familiar to me because I grew up here. They are not familiar to me as a sense of ethics or values or morals, actually. But I'm fluent in them because I have to be. And that really matters. I'm not really trying to start fights, but for me, this is the most obvious place to talk about this is in healthcare, and particularly women's reproductive healthcare, right? Whether you know this or not, it is actually mandated in Judaism to get an abortion sometimes. Mandated. Religiously prohibited to carry a pregnancy that will kill you. Prohibited. So abortion access is actually a religious freedom issue, not just a healthcare issue, right? But I live in a Christian nation, and so that argument falls on deaf ears. Okay, we should also care because right now, this very minute, the one on the left is pulled from yesterday's newspaper and the one on the right is pulled from just a month ago. We care because people are weaponizing specifically Christianity in real time. Pete Hegseth is a white Christian nationalist who is repeatedly calling the war on Iran a crusade. He yesterday led prayers hoping that people died in mass, which is just grotesque, actually. But on the right, we see a picture of the clergy movement as part of the Minnesota Protection anti-ICE rallies and protection movements, right? Like we are stopping an illegal band of unnamed, covered, masked people, thank you, from stealing our neighbors without warrants. So on the left, we have a weaponization. On the right, we also have a weaponization. Both are active, like literally today in our politics. So ignoring it doesn't make a lot of sense. I would also say that religious literacy, there we go, assumes the ability to read the room. Religion's always in it. It is that telltale heart chomping at the bit underneath the floorboards, whether you notice it or not. So when someone moves in a certain way, when we have bodily comportment rules that we grew up with from our religious communities or our senses of ethics, the way that we structure time, literally religious. In fact, let's get into some examples. So I want to walk you through all the places that religious literacy is actually like lurking in the floorboards, and that it would help us, it would behoove us to know more about how religion functions so that we could do better. So healthcare, absolutely. I gave you the abortion one right off the bat because I can't not be controversial, again, much to my dad's chagrin. But there's a question for me about what healthcare do you have access to? And how do you know? Where religion is in the waiting and the operating room. Sometimes you have a choice and sometimes you don't. Does our state have enough chaplains to have a Buddhist chaplain? Or are you going to get whichever chaplain they had on staff that day? Is your surgery allowable in your hospital? Because whether we know it or not, our healthcare is owned in large part by external sources. There we go. Is it okay if I come over this way? Okay, I just wasn't sure like where the camera is. So more than 1 in 7 patients in the United States every day are cared for in a Catholic hospital. Quite a lot of Catholic hospitals are not known as Catholic hospitals. And I want to be clear, I love Catholics. I'm not mad at Catholics for owning hospitals. But I do have questions about the privatization of hospitals and when your religion dictates care, especially because we have competing laws. So bear with me as I walk you through the data, and then I'll walk you through an example. So 1 in 7 patients are cared for in a Catholic hospital. These hospitals are not always named like St. Ignatius or St. John, right? There's not like a big cross on the front. Sometimes they're like Green Mountain Healthcare. Sometimes they're like, here's a mountain, right? Like it's just random words. So you could be being treated in a Catholic hospital without ever having that hospital disclose its affiliation. In fact, there is no law, statewide or federally, that says a hospital has to disclose their religious affiliation. And in fact, both Citizens United, Citizens United, the case that allowed for campaign finance, and also the Hobby Lobby case that allowed for people to not pay for certain parts of healthcare if it went against the company's deeply held beliefs, which, please anticipate my eye roll, that is ludicrous. But those 2 cases made it so that a Catholic hospital does not have to disclose that they are Catholic, which means I, a Jew, on the worst day of my life, I've been hit by a car. I'm making this up, okay? I'm using I statements. It's a good story, but it's not real. I'm pregnant. I don't know I'm pregnant. I get hit by a car. I'm unconscious. The law says I have to be taken to the closest Trauma 1 facility. The closest Trauma 1 facility is a Catholic hospital that is not disclosed as a Catholic hospital. I am a Jew. I have my own religious freedom to play with. The doctor is a Jew. They have their own religious freedom to play with. The nurse is a Muslim. They have their own religious freedom to play with. The hospital will not allow a DNC procedure. This is a daily occurrence. Daily. I had no choice in where I went. I was legally obligated to be brought there. The doctor doesn't get a say. The nurses don't get a say. The patient doesn't get a say. If the Catholic hospital does not think that abortion-supporting care is part of its responsibility to patients, you are SOL. SOL. And you better hope that your family is wealthy enough to move you to a new hospital, or that you're stable enough for that to happen. We have had 33 sepsis-related case deaths this year for women alone. It is March, right? That's scary. And I'm not saying that, again, I want to be really clear. This is not an anti-Catholic moment. This is a moment where American hospitals are owned privately, which means you and I have different access to care based on the accident of where we live, the accident of which trauma center happens to be nearby that you need to go to, and demography. If you live in a rural and less wealthy place, hi Vermont, that's us, you are more likely to have more privately owned hospitals than not. You are more likely to come under religious health care than not. That's scary to me, not just because it limits choices, but because it's hidden. It's hidden. We don't know which hospital is doing what. We don't always have a say. And then if you add in insurance companies, forget it. Imagine as a person trying to make a choice about our health care when we don't know that religion is lurking in the floorboards. The other thing, sorry, I'm just gonna keep looking at time. The other place that that religion lurks in the floorboards is law. Religion is not just what church you belong to or what synagogue you go to or how you pray. The United States government, going all the way back to its inception, but certainly starting in earnest in the 1800s, start setting parameters on what you're allowed to do, what you're allowed to do, what you're allowed to say, and what counts as proper practice. So there are endless examples here. I've just put these up for myself because it's important. Immigration law, naturalization, and religion is a long-standing issue. My favorite case of these is the Christians who immigrate from what is now known as the Middle East, so places like Lebanon and Syria in the early 1900s, so like 1910s, 1920s. There's all these lawsuits at the time because you were not allowed to become a citizen if you were not demonstrably white, period, okay? Now that sounds like a skin color problem, but it's not. There's a really famous case in 1938 that goes before the Supreme Court, and the judge, Tuttle, this guy named Tuttle, which sounds good because it's like, you know, the middle school, but it's not the same guy. This guy named Tuttle issues this rule. A guy from Syria has applied. He's a Christian. He goes out of his way to prove that he's Christian and that he's like a very good man. He brings his daughter, who's like blonde and has blue eyes. He's like trying real hard to be like, no, for real, I'm a citizen. Please let me in. And Tuttle gives this incredible racist response of, it sounds like you're a Christian, but here's the thing. You're kind of dusky, and Arabs are real close to Muslims, and everyone knows that the whole of the Mohammedan world couldn't possibly assimilate with the people they live with. So even though you're Christian, you're sort of brown, and you're kind of Arab, which Arab is probably just Muslim, so ipso facto, no citizenship for you. Bye. That stays the case for years, years and years and years. We have people trying to prove that they are white in order to be citizens, only to find that their religion either bars them from that or their tone bars them from that. Because in the same year, Tuttle makes all of these case arguments about being too close to Muslims is disqualifying for citizenship regardless of your own religion. That's really historical. The other kind of historical stuff, First Amendment cases date all the way back to 1878 and the LDS or Mormon Church. The LDS Church in 1878 said that it was their belief and therefore freedom of religion to have a polygamous marriage, multiple wives, one husband. The United States government said, oh, whoopsie doodle, we did say freedom of religion was really important, but not that. That's too free. That's not the correct Christianity. It's the Reynolds case of 1878, and in 1878 they said you can believe whatever you want, you may not do whatever you want. Okay, that's interesting. But it also means that then whatever you do, whomever gets to do whatever they want, probably comes from the place of power, right? Some people can do whatever they want. Other people can just believe whatever they want. It's baked right in from the very first First Amendment case. The very first, what are the limits of our freedoms case was about polygamy, and the judge said, it does seem like you should be able to do whatever you want, but in the benefit of all of us, that's just not right, so no thank you. That case has so many ramifications later. Very famously in the 1950s and 60s, there were a lot of Native American cases. It was a period of time called the disenfranchisement. The United States government really did launch a campaign in the 50s and 60s to totally disenfranchise Natives completely. It was like really problematic. And at that time, Natives were being prosecuted for quite a lot of practice of their own things. We were upping the national park system. We were expanding those acreages. So people that had access to national parks, particularly in California, to do their prayer outside, were told they were not allowed to be there. The park closed at 6, you see, and you did not have a permit, right? We also saw cases in the 60s and 70s and into the 80s about substances that the United States government, as part of the war on drugs, had said were not allowed, and Natives were like, I'm sorry, we've used peyote for thousands of years. How dare you? And people were getting fired and sued. So cases that went to the Supreme Court came in through unemployment cases. People being disqualified from unemployment because their firing was seen as completely reasonable and actually because of illegal behavior. So Native people who have used plants to have visions or as just part of ceremony are told no, but we're okay with wine, right? So we use substances in some of our services that make us a little loopy, but not okay for others. So these questions of disparity in law is really intense. I love teaching people that the way we know what a religion is it a legitimate religion, is actually nothing to do with what people do, what people believe, and do they have a book? Or to like paraphrase a really famous scholar of religion named Clifford Geertz, do they have a funny hat? Because all religions have funny hats. The real answer is are you a nonprofit? Are you recognized by the government as not having to pay taxes on the land you live on? Because if that's the case, boom, you're a religion. If not, you are not. You might be a 504(c) kind of nonprofit, but you wouldn't be a religious organization. So the IRS actually determines whether or not your church is legitimate, whether or not your mosque is legitimate. So you might imagine that people coming from minoritized religions like Santeria or Voodoo or frankly, any Black or Afro-Caribbean religion had a really hard time proving to the IRS that they should be tax exempt. They were just a club of people, you see, but the rest of everyone else gets to be a church, a temple, a synagogue. So the law encodes some of these power dynamics about religion. The other thing I really like to talk about is time. Calendars are not neutral. We talk about January and February and March as if everyone in the world has the same calendar. That is not true. We talk about calendars as shared, a collective way that we all understand what's going on, right? I'm a historian. I talk in dates constantly. But the thing is that this is the year of someone else's Lord, 2026, right? I love when people are like, the year of our Lord. I'm like, whose Lord is that? Our year is Jesus +1. Jesus is irrelevant to my people, both the ones I am and the ones I study, right? I work in 2 calendars at any given moment. Calendars are also not neutral because whose holiday is on your calendar? If you pull out your Apple phone or your Android or your Gmail, when you look at the calendar, which holidays were preloaded for you that you didn't have to opt into? Not one more extra thing, right? We all struggle with tech. Adding something's hard, right? You have to learn a skill in order to do it. Which ones come preloaded? Why does it never include Ramadan? 2 billion people in the world celebrate Ramadan. 2% of America celebrates Ramadan. Why is it never on the calendar as a default? Not as an option, as a default. I have been Jewish for 40 some odd years, 43 years. I have had children in the schools for the last, I don't know, my kid's in 7th grade now, so 7 years. It is only this year that Yom Kippur and Ramadan the Eid festival at the end of Ramadan, were given days off in South Burlington and Burlington City schools. That is a privilege, right? Next week I'm making this all about being Jewish because we're in a church and I always feel strange in a church, but next week is Passover. I work all day on Passover. I run home to get my Seder started. I loathe Christmas time because I'm so jealous. I am. I'm so jealous. Everything closes for the week before and the week after. You don't even have to celebrate. You can be a secular Christian and still have ease in your day. You can make cookies on Monday, celebrate with your dad on Tuesday, get to your mom's house on Wednesday, do something else on Thursday. I am running from school. I am running to get my kids. I am whipping up a dinner 5 days in advance on a weekend because I have to take personal days to celebrate my holidays. Right? I have to take personal days. What happens if I have little kids that get sick? What happens if we're living in a global pandemic that requires us to have days off more? That's an inequity in the calendar, and it is one of the ones that bothers me the most. I am irked by calendar privilege, not just because I'm Jewish, but because of all the little ways that it is an imposition of Christian domination into non-Christians' lives. Why is Christmas a federal holiday? It is our only religious holiday that is a federal holiday. What does that tell you about what our nation values? How might that appear to all of our non-Christian neighbors? On the one hand, I get it, right? Like, we have a Christian majority still in this country. I'm not mad that the government closes for that major holiday, but I am mad that Yom Kippur is 5,700 years old, and every year I have to tell someone what it is, because it doesn't come default on your calendar. Every year I have to tell UVM, please don't schedule a major thing on Yom Kippur. Every year. Because calendars come preloaded and we don't think about them, even though they encode privilege. Okay. I think it's a question of like, what do we do with that then? How do we make sense of it? Well, for me, some of it is doing this work. It's like, hey, have you paid attention? Hey, have you been paying attention? The call is coming in. Are you answering it? Some of it is also learning how to read it, right? Where can you download your interfaith calendar to put on your thing so that events like this maybe don't correspond or overlap with someone else's high holiday? Or you put a little asterisk. We know that this is Eid. Imagine communicating to your neighbors that you see them even if you're not making a change. I see you, I can't do anything about it just yet, but I acknowledge that you're there. That goes a long way. I actually don't need all of, I'm assuming, most of your days to stop on Yom Kippur or Passover. But acknowledging it would be dope. It'd be great. I am not sending you an email on December 24th. I'm probably not even sending you an email on December 21st. Because I have some sense of respect for what your calendar might look like at that time of year. So for me, it's just about being more conscientious. How do we learn to read the room? I also think making it visible and making it legible are part of the things that we are doing. There we go. Making religion visible and making religion legible are part of the things that we need to do. So notice, I haven't really given you slides on individual religions and what you need to know about them to be a better neighbor. No, because there's too much diversity. What am I going to like do what Episcopalians versus Methodists versus Baptists versus Southern Baptists versus Black Baptists? Like, come on, that's just like one corner of one tiny religion. You can't do that. What I can do is say, how do you start to see it? How do you start to notice what your calendar says? How do you start to notice what offerings the library has on display? How do we start to notice when we're scheduling things or when we're taking our health care? Are we paying attention to whether or not a doctor is working in a Catholic hospital or not? So making yourself more aware as you move through the day is actually step one, and it's the easiest one because you're in control of your own day. Most of us are in control of our own day. I'm coming back to the thesis statement, which is that religion is always in the room regardless of our personality or our personal spirituality. We've got to pay attention to how other things are being shaped, where and how we do it. We see this in our healthcare, our courts, our economy, the law enforcement and prisons, pop culture, you name it. So paying attention is actually my best advice. The last thing I would say is that this is not just a plug for all of my work. This is the actually important part, this Exploring Vermont's Religious Landscape. Those are my colleagues, Tom Borchert and Vicki Brennan. We just won a huge NEH grant from this administration, can you believe it, to study religion in Vermont. Vermont really famously is the least religious state in the country. More people in Vermont say that they do not go to church than anywhere else. And we were like, cool, I don't think religion's just going to church. Have you been at Mount Philo at like 5 a.m.? I have a very precocious small child. There are people doing yoga up there. There are people feeling connected to the world around them. Vermont is a deeply spiritual place. So we're studying it in like, how do we make it visible? And then those are just the other ways to find, if you wanted more detail on any of this, those are the easy ways to do it. And Religion Isn't Done With You is in every local library because I put a copy there myself. So you don't have to buy anything. I donated to the libraries. The other thing that I'll just end with is that being good neighbors means you have to see the religion. You have to see it. You can't do anything about it if you don't see it first. So the thing I always say is like, I always come back to calendars because it's the thing we're all in all the time. For this group, you're a group that meets all the time. Are you paying attention to other people's religious holidays? Are you, when you go to the public library, are you paying attention to what the offerings are? Are you volunteering to say, you know what, I don't know that much about Ramadan, but I heard that Muslims break their fast every night. Maybe we'll host a community iftar and see what happens, right? There are ways that you can be a good neighbor just by asking a few questions, and I do think that in a moment of deep inequity and deep tension, those neighborly overtures are so important and mean so much to people. I will stop there. I think it's time for Q&A. Did I do okay on time? Ooh, exactly 45 minutes. That's not bad. That's not bad. I'm talkative.
Yeah, so we have 15 minutes for question and answer. Well, so we have people on Zoom with questions, that side of the room, this side of the room. And if you have a question, please wait for the mic. Anybody over here on this side?
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Bert.
I have a question about your perspective on people who are a-religious, specifically atheists. And so it seems like there's a judgment that somebody who's atheist is also amoral or somehow, doesn't have the same values. But that doesn't make any sense. I mean,
Correct.
People can have excellent values and be good neighbors and can be good people and have no specific religious beliefs. Yet I think atheists are among the more kind of disliked and suspicious people. People are suspicious of them and critical of them.
Yes, very much so. So that is a great question, and it comes from, there's a few ways to answer it. I think the direct way to answer it is, yes, that is a long-standing, arguably Protestant understanding of atheism, right? So in this country, we care about that a lot because we are a Protestant nation. Until I'm gonna get the date wrong. It was the early aughts, until I think it was like 2005, 2006, 2007, something like that. Atheists, when we did these polls of like, who does America hate the most? Atheists were always the top. It was like atheists, religious, like it was like atheists, then it was other denominations that we don't like in our own community, then it was Jews and Muslims, always. After 9/11, Muslims jumped to the top real quick, and we don't care about atheists for a while there. I think popularly we care about atheists again because we are on a Christian right upswing, and so atheists are reviled because they are blasphemous rather than just problematic, right? They're seen as fallen rather than cultivated. I'm using Christianity a lot here because other religions are down with atheism. Jews can be atheists. Muslims can be atheists because the action is the thing that's important. So there's a lot of questioning built into those religions, and therefore there's a lot of religion, and obviously it's not everyone, right? Like all 2 billion Muslims would be like, yeah, it's cool if you don't believe in God. That's not true. But are there traditions of Muslim atheists? Yes, there are. Just like there are traditions of Jewish atheists, because religion isn't always a choice. It's not always belief. This is my favorite story about atheism. It's like taking your question in a different direction, Bert, so if I'm bothering you, just cut me off. Atheism is not equally available to everybody. My favorite story of this is actually a stolen story from a comedian named Ahmed Ahmed. He's an Egyptian American. He was born in the States. And right after 9/11, he founds this thing called the Axis of Evil comedy tour, right? Because the Axis of Evil was big for George Bush. So they got a couple of Middle Eastern guys, a Korean guy, and a Cuban guy, and they went on tour, and they told jokes. One of the jokes that Ahmed tells is that he's a Muslim atheist, but don't let him be near you at the TSA, right? Like when I go to the TSA and I'm like, hey, I'd like to go to Canada, and they're like, Muslim, right? He can't be like, actually, I drink beer and I eat bacon and I don't believe in God, because his name says that he's Muslim. So atheism is not equally available to all of us, right? Jewish atheists are real. It's my other second favorite atheism story. Sigmund Freud, really famous guy, likes cigars, laying on beds, and doesn't like women that much. Famously Austrian, dies in London, right? Because he has to escape the Nazis. If I ever join a band, it will be called Sigmund Freud's Christmas Tree, because Freud was so atheistic and so intent on removing Judaism from his family's life for safety that he forbade Yiddish in his house. He named his children with Christian names, and until the bitter end was like, we celebrate Christmas, right? Like we have a Christmas tree in our house. That's how they'll know we're Viennese. Sigmund Freud dies in London because the Nazis don't care what you believe, they care what you are. And what you are is racially different. So Muslims at the TSA don't get to be atheists. Jews in Germany don't get to be atheists. And so this question of whether atheism is good or bad, for me, is always a white Protestant question, because it is a white Protestant value that atheism is a problem. But you're absolutely right, Bert, that in this country we see it as valueless. My friend Chris Steiner, who was at Harvard and now I think is at a university in Minnesota, I'm completely gonna, he moved for his partner and I'm like blanking on which university in Minnesota he's in. But he's an atheist and he is a secular humanist and he is a chaplain in secular humanism. So he is an atheist chaplain at his university, and he literally ministers to students. I'm using that language on purpose. He would be so mad if I use that language. But he ministers to students on the premise that actually, like, we can just be good people. I don't actually need like a tablet of 10 commandments to be good people. Like, I don't speed because the speed limit tells me not to speed. I don't speed because I'm not a crazy person. I don't want to hit people in the crosswalk, right? So his whole thing, I think his book is called, it's like A Religious or A Relig. I'll think of it and I will email it to you, or I'll email it to the crew after. But he has this great book about that exact thing, that secular humanism and atheism are not necessarily valueless, and he traces the history of why we think it is. Great question. Thank you so much.
Hello, here
There
we go. This year is the first year I've heard of the holiday, and you mentioned it. Is it EID?
Yes.
Why is it just currently coming out, and what is it?
Okay, I will answer that. Eid in Arabic, E-I-D. Sometimes you'll say it like an apostrophe E-I-D because it's an ayn. In Arabic, that letter is ayn, and so you say it at the very back of your throat. Eid, ayn. Eid just means festival, celebration. There are two major Eids in an Islamic calendar year. One is for the end of Ramadan, that's Eid al-Fitr, and the other is Eid al-Adha, which happens in the middle of Hajj, which is a very specific time of year. It's not just the pilgrimage, it happens in a very specific 10-day period in the year. Eid al-Adha is commemorating the story of Abraham's sacrifice. In Islam, it's Abraham sacrificing Ismail or Ishmael, not Isaac, right? Because Islam traces its lineage through Hagar, not through Sarah. Does that make sense to everybody? If it doesn't, that's okay. I can teach you the Bible some other time. Eid al-Adha celebrates that sacrifice. It's the same exact story, it's just a different son that gets swapped out, same idea of like Abraham's faith. Eid al-Fitr is the end of Ramadan, and it's just a party. We are excited, we made it through this holy month, we did it, alhamdulillah, thank God, we made it. God is merciful. So the reason we're hearing about it now is because people have agitated and gotten it on calendars, truly. Eid is one of the largest and most celebrated holidays in the world. Both of them, certainly Eid al-Fitr, the end of Ramadan. Because just like you and I, there are quite a lot of Christians who are like, every Sunday we're going, and there are quite a lot who are like, maybe I'll go for Christmas, maybe I'll go for Easter, but mostly I'm just gonna have grandma's brisket, right? Loads of Muslims are like that too. Ramadan is the thing that Muslims tap into even when they're not regular mosque goers. It's the big one. So Eid al-Fitr tends to be a really important holiday. And when a group of parents, myself included, worked with the school boards to see what holidays we could have off, the conversation was, which is the highest holiday? We don't have the population in Vermont to get both Eids off, so which is the one we want? And Eid al-Fitr was the one that people decided because Ramadan is a big family holiday. And that last day of Ramadan is like big parties, big family gatherings. Picture like Thanksgiving plus Christmas plus fireworks. And truly, if you ever have the experience of Eid in a Muslim majority country, I recommend. It's gorgeous and fun and deeply inclusive, like just so fun. Yeah, great question. I think there's a question in the back.
So my question has to do with the way religion is manipulated. I think it's either Texas or Oklahoma had a new school voucher system.
Yeah, it's Texas.
And a dozen or so Muslim schools were denied because the excuse was they were somehow tied to terrorist organizations.
Yep.
I mean, it seems that kind of thing seems so blatantly contradictory to the values that we ascribe. And it sounds like it'll take months or years to go through the courts. What's going on that can happen, I guess, is what I
Okay, that's a really hard question to do quickly. The reality is that in the 1970s, the moral majority forms, right? I assume many of you remember this, actually, when the moral majority sort of comes into fruition. The moral majority is a response to the civil rights movement. There's no way around it. It is a response to the civil rights movement. It is explicitly formed around abortion rights and Roe v. Wade after '73, but people like Pat Buchanan and Pat Robertson, these are folks that deeply were in favor of segregation, so they are getting the ball rolling in 68, 69, 70. Roe v. Wade happens in 73, and then you get it up through the alley. Everyone's panicked. Ladies are gonna have freedom now, and that's bad. That 30-year trajectory of the 70s moral majority and the shifting of Christian identity in the United States leads to this situation in Texas if you throw in a little bit of 9/11, right? So we start to see a Christian consolidation around whiteness, Christianity, and a very conservative understanding of gender roles becoming the litmus test against which all other Christians are valued. It's why we see the flip in Catholic voters, right? Catholic voters used to be the strongest Democratic bloc for generations. After the moral majority starts to say, you are not a real Christian and therefore not a real American if you don't get on board, and because abortion is one of those things that's in the Catholic back pocket, it becomes this very strange bedfellows. And frankly, you see this like, I don't know how to say this without like steroided out, like it's hulked out kind of white Christian conservatism tied with a nationalism and patriotism. And all of that is really going great in the 90s. It's going great. Like, we're loving this. Except that the culture wars aren't really taking off because there's not a new enemy. The Soviet Union falls in '92. No one really cares anymore about this us versus them American patriotism. There's a vacuum. 9/11. So you have this moral majority that has coalesced, that has made strange bedfellows of people that had never agreed before. It's consolidating Christian ideology. Then you get 9/11, so you get a new enemy. We don't have an enemy. We have stopped fighting the Borises and the Natashas. We now need a new enemy. It's Ahmed and Fatima. It's grim but true. And then that coalesces around wartime. Now we have the war on terror. And 20 years of that is a lot of time to really kind of shore up the boundaries of what we expect white Protestantisms and white Catholics to look like. So that's a really quick 50-year history in like 2 seconds of an answer. The real answer is that like, I think people are racist. I don't actually have a positive answer for you. I think people are kind of racist. And I think racism against Islam is at an all-time high. We have no data that suggests otherwise. In fact, the data is pointing to last year being the deadliest year for Muslims since 2002 in this country. So we're in a peak. I wish we weren't, but we're in a peak from what I'm following. Part of my job is to follow hate crimes, and so I follow hate crimes. It's grim. I don't recommend it. I do like wine. I hope that answered your question. I do think it's going to work through the courts pretty well. The other thing that's going on at the same time is that religious freedom cases have been a strategy of this moral majority coalition. Religious freedom cases in the last 20 years have almost exclusively ruled in favor of Christians not having to do stuff, like not having to pay for abortion care, not having to pay for health care, not having to sit through sex ed classes, you name it. So religious freedom law has also gotten really conservative and really tight in the last 20 years.
Thanks, Ilyse.
Yeah, great job.
Thank you. I really enjoyed your talk. You made me think about the calendar, which I'd never thought of.
I did a good thing.
Yes. I'm interested in your research and what you intend to do in that research. And give us
Yeah.
version.
I'm writing 2 books right now. My first book is called Imperial Pandemics. It traces how the British legal system in colonial Britain, so like 1800s and 1900s, early 1900s, they set up these laws around the world about who get to count as what religion. Like, how do we know what a Jew is legally? Actually stems from the British Empire, weirdly. So I'm kind of tracing those laws around the world and showing how a certain British racism, we've inherited it and then we promulgate it. So I'm calling it a pandemic because I do think it's contagious and gross. That's step 1. I was on a Fulbright for that project, and I did a lot of interviews in the UK of Muslims who had lived there, and their families had lived there for almost 200 years, but because of Britain's laws had not been eligible for citizenship until the 1980s. And they are still seen as immigrants and outsiders, even though their family have been in England longer than my family has been in the United States, right? So I'm kind of tracing what immigration and migration and that stuff. The second book I'm writing is actually a deeply personal book about white Christian supremacy and adoption. I'm an adopted person. The adoption industry in the United States has always been run by Christians, and in the era in which I was adopted, it was known as the baby scoop, where the Catholic Church just sort of like stole babies from parents. And so I'm using my documentation to tell that historical story with a lot of archival work. So it's a little bit intense, and frankly, I might hold on that one while my parents are still with us, because I think it might hurt their hearts a little, and that's not my intention, but I do think the question historically is really interesting. And then that NEH grant, we are researching religion in Vermont, and we're researching irreligion in Vermont, and we're training students through internships to ask those questions. So we are partnering with local churches across the state. Frankly, like, if you're here and you want me to hang out with your church, like, let me know. And we're frankly sending students to interview you. What's the history of your church? What's the history of your congregation? What kind of work do you do in the community? Where do you see yourself religiously? Do you see yourself as spiritual? So we're doing a lot of big data surveys right now, and then my hope is that this will be a multi-year longitudinal project that'll produce a few books. I'm co-writing with a student right now. They're a student, so by co-writing, I don't know what I mean by that, but we'll get there eventually. We'll get their skills up eventually, but we're co-writing right now about the history of Islam in this state, because it's actually fascinating. The history of Islam in this state goes back to the Bosnian genocide, and we were one of the first states to welcome Bosnian refugees here in Vermont, but that also means, based on the refugee asylum program, it creates a chain, right? So the State Department then decides, oh, there's Muslims here. Great, we'll send all Muslims here. So Vermont per capita is actually weirdly one of the most diverse Muslim states in the country, because from Bosnia on, every single refugee community, and from Bosnia on, all of our wars, our Middle Eastern wars, comes here. So we have a very diverse, very eclectic, very interesting Muslim community here, and it's unique, so we're writing that history. Sorry, that was a lot of talking about me. Thank you for that question.
I think we have to cut it here. We might have time for one quick question. Over here.
I'll do my best to keep it short.
Thank you very much. Medical scientists have told us that it's not a question of if But when another COVID-19 like epidemic's going to hit, probably in our own lifetimes,
Definitely.
not just in this country but in the world. And yet, it seems like it's state by state makes up decisions about whether you have to get vaccinated or not. And sometimes religions get involved with that.
Very much so.
What is your response to that?
That was supposed to be a short question. Okay, my response is I can't keep that short. My response, my quickie response is that it's really complicated. The wellness movement in the United States comes out of three main trajectories. The first is very far right, like the rightist right, like the people you should not see in public, the rightist right, like murderers, right, like the worst, because we don't trust the government, right? It's that kind of militant militia thinking. The second strain of people that we get it from are people, mostly women, who have not been heard by systems of power like medicine. So we know that women take 7 to 10 years longer than men to be diagnosed with the same diseases. We know that it wasn't until 1994 that women needed to be included in medical trials, right? So like women tend to opt out because there's a lack of trust, because an earned lack of trust. The third one is there's a lot of, particularly evangelical Christianity has a very particular strain of whatever's natural is natural. So don't trust medicine, not because we don't trust doctors, which is like the far right version and kind of this like ladies version. We don't trust medicine because God gave us this illness and God has given us the ability to heal ourselves. And if we're not healing ourselves, we're probably just not good Christians. And that is a very specific American prosperity gospel history of like the better you do in the world, the more God loves you. So if you're sick, it's a punishment. That's a very specific American Christian and evangelical strain of thinking. I think it's cuckoo, and I wish we had federal policies around vaccines. I like medicine, I like science, I like research, so I can't identify with any of those positions, but that's my quick sense of what they are. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fuerst. Thank you for your lecture.
Thank you.
Are you available for questions?
I'm going to hang out for